Hello everyone, in today's video I'm going to do something quite different from the usual. I'm going to show the realistic power levels of the Cell Saga. What do I mean by realistic? Well, I mean that I'm going to analyze each part of the anime, manga, Daisenshu and other official sources, and I'm not going to be afraid not to exaggerate the power levels, because the reality is that if you stop to think and analyze, the real power levels go far beyond what you imagine. And this already starts in the Cell arc itself, where the power levels go far above what you think. So let's start the analysis. Let's start the analysis with the power level of King Cold, who was said in the Daisenshu to have a slightly lower power than Frieza on Namek, i.e. around 100 million power levels. Moving on to Mecha Frieza, who many people are wrong to determine his power. Many say that he would be weaker than his Namek version, which is not true, since he says that he has become stronger, and not only that, he says that he now possibly has enough power to defeat Goku, which means that at the very least Mecha Frieza would have the same power as Goku on Namek. So Mecha Frieza would have around 150 million power levels. What is the power level of Trunks from the future? Well, first let's look at the difference in power between Goku Super Saiyan and Frieza of Namek, their difference being that Goku was 1.25 times stronger than Frieza. The power difference between future Trunks and Mecha Frieza is much greater, but even if they had the same power difference as Goku and Frieza, Trunks would still have a power level of around 187 million in Super Saiyan. But let's take a closer look, using an official guide on Daisenshu, which says that a fighter who receives no damage from another fighter, then the fighter is at least 2 times stronger than the other. What's my point? Mecha Frieza throws his supernova at Trunks and he receives it without suffering a scratch, considering that the supernova would have the same power as Frieza's punches, which is not true, since the supernova is clearly stronger. Then Trunks would have to be 2 times stronger than Mecha Frieza, so Trunks would already have at least 300 million power level in Super Saiyan, and 6 million in his base form. What about Goku? After training for a year on Yardrat, which has proven to be a very good planet to train on in Dragon Ball Super, it is said that his power increases just by training there, meaning that as well as increasing his power by training, he also has a power increase bonus for training there. Taking the information that says that a fighter 2 times stronger than the other can withstand blows without any damage, then you can create a table that will be very important for the rest of the video, which is this. 1 time stronger means that they have the same power. 1.25 times stronger than the fighter would be a little stronger. 1.5 times stronger the fighter would have a notable advantage over the other. 1.75 times stronger and the fighter would have a great advantage over the other fighter but could still suffer injuries. 2 times stronger and he would be immune to blows from the other fighter. Taking this data and analyzing the fight between Trunks and Goku, we realize that Goku suffered practically no damage from Trunks' sword, but he energized his finger. I think Goku was very close to having twice the power of Trunks, but he hasn't got there yet, so he was 1.75 times stronger than Trunks from the future at that time. So Goku post Yardrat would have 525 million power level in Super Saiyan and 10.5 million in base form. Some might argue that Trunks wasn't using his full power as Goku said, but don't forget that Trunks says that Goku wasn't using his full power either. So if they were both using their full power, then the result shouldn't be that different. Now let's fast forward 3 years to the arrival of the androids, 3 years that the characters spent training. Considering that Goku increased his power 3.5 times by training for 1 year, then in 3 years he should increase his power 10.5 times his power, leaving him with 110 million and 250,000 power levels in base form. But I'm not going to do that for 2 reasons. Firstly, Goku must have received a Zenkai after the battle against Frieza, which already gave him an increase in power even before training in Yardrat, and secondly that training in Yardrat is much more efficient than training on planet Earth, as I said before, so instead of 110 million power I think Goku would have around 70 million power level, which is still quite a lot compared to what you're used to believing, since, as I said at the beginning of the video, Dragon Ball fans always like not to put power levels too high, which ends up making the power levels never be faithful to what the anime and manga actually make them out to be. Goku would then have 3.5 billion power levels in Super Saiyan, but because of his heart disease, in his battle against Android 19 he only had a power of 2.1 billion power level, while Android 19 had an initial power of 2 billion, but after absorbing some energy from Goku he increased his powers to 2.2 billion power level. I don't see why some fans think that Frieza would be more powerful than androids 19 and 20 when both androids saw the powers of Mecha Frieza, Trunks and Goku Yardrat and were still confident that they would win. Contrary to what many people think, Android 20 is stronger than Android 19, as confirmed in the Daisenshu, so Android 20 would have at least 2.4 billion levels of power. Moving on to Piccolo, who had a greater power than Android 20 but the difference wasn't too great, having approximately 2.85 billion levels of power. On the other hand, Vegeta completely destroyed Android 19, but note that Vegeta was still taking damage from the android, so he wasn't twice as powerful, but he was pretty close. And it was also confirmed by Piccolo that Vegeta had surpassed Goku's powers, the same Piccolo who spent 3 years training with Goku every day and is well aware of his power. So Vegeta would have 80 million levels of power in base form and 4 billion levels of power in Super Saiyan. The next analysis will confuse many people and many people will disagree, but androids 17 and 18 would also have 4 billion power levels. Contrary to what many people think, Android 18 was not stronger than Vegeta. In fact, they had the same power. This is proven in several ways. Firstly, this is visible in the anime itself, where at the beginning of the fight Vegeta fights at the same level as Android 18. You may think that Android 18 was actually suppressed, but in fact Vegeta only lost because his power was decreasing throughout the battle, while Android 18's power was always the same since she has infinite energy. This is proven in the Daisenshu, which says that Vegeta had the same power as Android 18 but lost because of Android 18's infinite energy. And this also applies to Android 17, since it is stated in the Daisenshu that both Androids 17 and 18 have the same level of power. So in short, Vegeta, Android 17 and Android 18 have 4 billion power levels. Watching some videos on YouTube that put Gohan Super Saiyan 2 with 5 billion power level, you can already see that if you analyze minimally you will realize that the reality is much higher. Even I lowered the powers in my videos precisely because they would be too high. Now let's move on to the second part of the Cell Saga, which begins with Piccolo saying after the fusion that no, he wouldn't have 4 billion levels of power, but 5 billion. And I'll explain. Although Piccolo appeared to have the same power as Android 17, he was actually stronger. This can be seen in the battle itself, where at the beginning Piccolo was clearly superior as Android 16 warned 17. But again Piccolo is balanced against Android 17 because while his power was decreasing, that of the android remains the same. In addition, Piccolo had just fought Cell minutes before, so the fact that after several minutes fighting Android 17 he remains balanced proves that in his total power he is superior. Another thing that proves this is that Piccolo is stated as the most powerful Z warrior, thus being more powerful than Vegeta and consequently more powerful than the androids. Now to Cell's first form, which didn't suffer damage from Piccolo's Ki Blast, which means that he would have twice as much power, making him 10 billion times more powerful. We're talking about a Piccolo who at that time would have around 4 billion power since he was worn out from the fight, but it's already been confirmed in the Daisenshu that a blast of Ki is more powerful than a normal punch, so assuming that a blast of Ki is 1.25 times stronger than a normal punch, then Piccolo's blast of power would have 5 billion power level. Cell's first form would then have a power level of 10 billion. The same goes for Android 16, who has been practically confirmed as having the same power as Cell. Now on to Cell's second form, which did not suffer any damage from Android 16, meaning it would have at least 20 billion levels of power. Moving on to Vegeta post-time chamber, who was not only able to be immune to Cell's blows but also to Cell's Gallic gun. Taking into account that the Kamehameha's multiplier has been confirmed to be 2.2 times, and that Goku in the Saiyan Saga had 24,000 power level using the Kaioken times 3. Then Goku's Kamehameha against Vegeta would have a power level of 52.8 thousand. Vegeta has 18,000 power, but with his Gallic gun he was able to rival Goku's Kamehameha times 3, so the multiplier of the Gallic gun would be 2.9 times the base power. This means that Cell's Gallic gun had a power level of approximately 58 billion. To make the number easier to read, Vegeta would have a power level of 112.5 billion in Super Saiyan Grade 2, 75 billion power level in Super Saiyan and 1.5 billion in his base form. Trunks of the future would have a similar power according to Vegeta, so he would have a power level of 105 billion in Super Saiyan Grade 2. And it was confirmed in El Manga Legendario that Trunks was 10 times more powerful in his Super Saiyan Grade 3 form, meaning that he had 1,050 billion power levels. Much bigger than you thought, huh? And remember that no, Trunks wasn't more powerful than the perfect Cell. Maybe he was at the time, but Cell increased his powers to Cell's level. Let's now move on to Mastered Super Saiyan Goku, who managed to surprise Trunks by using only 50% of his power, meaning that with only 50% of his power he was already superior to Trunks' peak power. In fact, Trunks was surprised long before Goku reached 50%, so it's possible that Goku is more powerful than him using only 20% or 30%, but since we can't be sure of that, we'll just say that Goku was already superior to Trunks at 50% of his power. So Goku in the Cell games would have at least 2.4 trillion levels of power. Gohan being much more powerful since Goku says he was sure he would defeat Cell, and although he saw Gohan transform into Super Saiyan 2 in the anime, This never happened in the manga, meaning that Gohan's power was far superior to Goku's even before he became Super Saiyan 2. This is also proven after Goku's fight against Cell, where Gohan admits that Goku and Cell's movements were slow. And also when Cell realizes that Gohan is stronger than Goku even after Gohan uses only a fraction of his power. Being honest, I could still put Gohan higher, but I'm going to say that he would be around 3.6 trillion level of power. And since Super Saiyan 2 doubles his power, then Gohan in Super Saiyan 2 would have 7.2 trillion power level. After returning from the explosion, Cell became the super perfect Cell who, according to himself, was as strong as Gohan. Since the super perfect form is a parallel to Super Saiyan 2, then in his perfect form Cell would have 3.2 trillion power levels and 7.2 trillion in super perfect form. So those are all the realistic power levels of the Cell Saga, the ones you can analyze and come to a conclusion. And yes, I know it sounds crazy and too high, but remember, in the Frieza Saga, Goku went from 90,000 to 150 million power levels in just a few hours. What's to stop him going from 150 million to 2.4 trillion in 5 years? Exactly. Nothing. So draw your own conclusions. Maybe I'll make a video about the Majin Buu Saga, which has even more confusing power levels, and you'll be surprised. Take care and see you in the next video.